Hi, I am Leaf with Professional Equine Grooms, and this is Horse Clipping 101 from start to finish, everything you need to know about clipping your horse. But first, a couple of ground rules when it comes to clipping. Number one, not all horses need to be clipped. Some of them really benefit from it. You don't have to do a full clip and you don't have to follow a specific pattern. Just clip your horse the way that they need it. Body clipping does take practice, but don't worry about it. Any mistakes are eventually going to even out and nobody's going to be the wiser. And it's really important to keep the instruction manual from your clippers just so you can troubleshoot if you have something go on with your tools. Why would you need to body clip your horse? The main reasons are for your horse's health and for their comfort. For example, the climate that you live in plays into how comfortable your horse is during the winter time. Some horses grow a very, very thick coat because that is their genetic breeding, like a fjord or an Icelandic, but they might live somewhere really south in Florida and the climate and their coat just doesn't match. That's a great reason to clip your horse. Some horses are also prone to skin infections, especially on their lower legs and elsewhere on their body, where clipping is going to help that skin and hair coat stay really healthy. Also, having a clipped horse makes cleaning a little bit easier, and if you do need to apply medications to your horse, a clipped horse is really easy to do that with. There are also cases in which a horse has a metabolic disorder like Cushing's disease, where the hair growth is interrupted by the horse's hormones and it grows thick and long and woolly when it's not supposed to, like the summer. And in those cases, you definitely want to help your horse be more comfortable by clipping. If you ride your horse in the winter and your horse actively sweats during exercise, that can sometimes be alleviated by clipping. And sweating during exercise can create two different scenarios. One, they're more likely to be overheated as you're riding, and two, they can get chilled as they cool off when you're finished riding. There's actually been some scientific studies done to recognize a clipped and unclipped horse during exercise. And one study found that unclipped horses have a much larger energy expenditure and take longer to thermulate back to their regular body temperature when they're exercised. You may also clip your horse because they have a tendency to develop skin issues, like an equine pastural dermatitis on their lower legs or a rain rot along their top line, their dorsal side. Longer hair on horses can also create a big petri dish for skin funk to start to happen. That long hair will trap moisture from sweats and the environment. Maybe there's some lice or mites in there. There could be bacteria or fungus on the skin, and it can all kind of cook, if you will, into a skin problem. If that's the case for your horse, clipping them helps alleviate that petri dish effect where the skin can get a lot more air. You're going to see any skin problems develop quicker, and you're going to be able to treat them easier because you don't have to wade your way through a forest of hair to apply medications. And you also might find that only clipping parts of your horse is helpful. For example, sometimes with very long winter coats, around the girth area, there's a lot of friction and the hair can pull and tug, creating mats or sore spots or even hair loss and open sores. So clipping trouble areas like that, even without doing a body clip, you can help alleviate some discomfort for your horse. Let's talk about the types of clipping. A full body clip is where you take all the hair off your horse, including the legs and including the face. You might also decide that you want to do a trace clip or some variation on a trace clip where you're only clipping the parts of your horse that tend to get sweaty. For example, you could do a bib clip if your horse's neck gets very sweaty, and that's when you clip from underside of the chin all the way down the neck into the chest area. You could also do a blanket clip where you leave your horse's top half and their legs and half their face fuzzy. An Irish clip will clip everything in a diagonal line from their chin or ear all the way down to a little bit behind where the girth is. You might also want to do a trace clip, which basically creates a long racing stripe from your horse's cheeks all the way to his other cheeks. Sometimes this traditional trace clip will actually go up and over the flank area because that does sometimes get a lot of sweat. And you may just want to trim up some extra fuzzy areas on your horse and not even do anything to their body. For example, you could remove an extra fuzzy bridle path, or you could tidy up their lower legs without clipping all the way to the skin. Having a nicely clipped and clean bridle path is also really nice to do for your horse because it creates a smooth, even surface for your horse's tack, like his halter and his bridle, to rest on. Otherwise, you kind of have a knot of hair up here, and that creates uneven pressure across the pole. So, bridle path, definitely more comfortable for your horse. It is important to let your horse keep their whiskers. These are actually sensory hairs that tell the horse's brain what's going on around their muzzles because their eyes can't see that. So this helps them find food and navigate their world. So I always recommend keeping those whiskers nice and cute and fuzzy and not removing them. When should you clip your horse? When they need it. Doesn't matter the time of year. If the weather doesn't match the hair coat, you can clip it, but be sure you have a blanketing system in place if you need one. You can also choose to clip when they start sweating so much it becomes a problem. And again, have a blanketing plan in place. On that same note, you could do an early clip in the fall where you take all the hair off a full body clip, and then a couple weeks later, maybe you touch them up and do a trace clip, allowing all of those previously clipped areas to start to fill in and get a little bit more fuzzy. But what about clipping in the springtime when your horse is already shedding their winter coat? It's totally fine to clip them in the spring if it's going to help them shed and help them be more comfortable. If you are worried about cutting the top off that summer coat that's coming in underneath, you don't need to worry about it. Everything's going to smooth out eventually. And how do you train your horse to like the clippers? Some horses are scared of them because they make funny sounds and they vibrate and they tickle. So well before you need to clip is when you need to train your horse to love the clippers. You want your horse to associate clipping with getting a reward, and that could be a pat or a scratch or a nice word or even a treat. But this should always be associated with a positive experience that your horse has. And you can do this in a series of steps. Back up a couple of weeks or months before you know you might be clipping, and then slowly start to work with your horse around the clippers. I would spend a couple of minutes every day for maybe a week or so before moving on to the next step. So for the first step, you might decide to just hold the clippers in your hand, let your horse see them, reward them for being good and quiet. Don't even turn them on. Give your reward, do that for a couple of days, maybe a week or so, and then you move on to the next step, which is letting your horse be touched by the clippers. And give your reward, maybe a treat, maybe a pat. And then let them know that being touched by the clippers equals a positive experience. For the third step, you might hold them at a distance, turn them on, and let your horse get accustomed to the sound. Always reassuring and letting them be calm and happy and receive positive reinforcement from you. One step further would be to turn them on and to place them on their body. And I recommend doing that on big muscle groups like the shoulder or the flank. Smaller areas can be a little bit ticklish, so you want them to get used to this feeling on the larger muscles. And then you are ready to actually clip your horse. If at any time during this process your horse starts to get nervous, back up a step and reinforce that step before you move on to the next one. And when you are working with your horse, training them to accept the clippers, make sure that they are happy. Have they had some exercise and some turnouts? Have they seen their friends? Do they have a full belly? Can they really focus on what you're doing with them? So create a scenario where they're already very comfortable, and then you can add the clippers in. Now, how do you decide what style of clipper to use? You have three basic choices. The first are your small trimmers. These typically have a 5-in-1 blade that's adjustable with this little flipper switch at the bottom. And these will take your blades from clipping very close to very far away. So they go from a number 9 all the way to a number 40. These are great for small areas on your horse, very thin hair. You wouldn't want to actually body clip with these. You could do bridle paths, you could touch up maybe their jaw bones, maybe you want to touch at their fetlocks. That's what your trimmers are for. Trimmers are usually cordless. Some of them have a charging port where you plug them into the wall to charge. Some have batteries that pop out, like this one. If you have the charging port variety, you can actually charge them and use them at the same time if you need to. Then you have the body clippers. These are a little bit larger. They have a different style of blade. It's not adjustable, but it is detachable. So you can easily flip between different blade sizes. Normally for body clipping, you would use a 10. Sometimes if you want to leave a little bit more hair, you would use an 8.5. For body clippers, they are available in corded and cordless models. Same thing, these charge by connecting to an outlet. You can use them as they're charging, or you can use them without the cord. And then you have shears. They're very wide, they have very big teeth. They cover a lot of surface area very quickly. They are a little bit loud, and they can be tricky to use on very small areas like around their face and your horse's legs. But if you have a horse with a thick coat, these are ideal. Your shears are almost always corded. How do you know which clipper blade to pick? For your trimmers and your body clippers, you have the 5-in-1, you have these detachables. They are all numbered, and the numbers mean something. The higher the number, the more hair is removed. So using a number 8.5 or a 9 is going to remove less hair than a 10 or a 15 or a 30 or a 40. By the time you get to the 40 and 45 and 50s, you're clipping almost to the skin as if your horse is going to have a little medical procedure done. It's also very handy that most clipper blades, they have the number on them. They also have in millimeters how much hair will remain on your horse. Shears are a little bit of a different story. These blades actually screw on here with this knob. These come in 2 pieces that you screw onto the clipper body, and they're labeled as surgical, fine, medium, coarse, and cover coat. Each size removing a different amount of hair. The surgical and the fine we're going to remove a lot of hair. And as you work your way up all the way to the cover coat, that actually leaves 5 millimeters of hair, so your horse can stay fairly fuzzy. You can also use clipper combs, or sometimes called clipper guards, on your clippers to get a little space between your horse and the clipper blade. This is going to leave more hair as well. They look like this, and they just slide on the blade. Now that you have your clippers and your clipper blades selected for your clipping, don't forget about 2 really important things. Your coolant, which is a spray, and your clipper oil. Nothing's more important than the clipper oil. Every few minutes, like every 5 minutes when you're clipping, stop, brush out the hair from the clippers, apply some coolant, wipe off any extra. This is going to take the temperature of the blades down a little bit. Now, coolant will also help grease things along, but it evaporates really quickly, and you want to have something on your clipper blades to help them glide through your horse's coat smoothly, which is why you need clipper oil. Every 5 minutes, apply some more clipper oil. It's quite easy to do this. You just put a drop here, here, and on the edge, and sometimes you can put a drop down the sides where you see the 2 pieces of the clipper coming together. Turn on your clippers and wipe off any extra. Then you're back to clipping. And by now you're thinking, we're ready to clip. Almost. We want to get our horse ready to clip so that the final job looks really smart. The first thing we want to do is we want to make sure our horse is as clean as possible. Dirty horses have lots of debris and dust and dander in their coats, and as the clipper blades are going through your horse's coat, that dust and debris and dander gets clogged up in there. Then the clippers will start to pull on your horse's coat. Horse is not going to like that very much, and it leaves an uneven finish. A very thorough curry comb session with your favorite curry comb or your grooming gloves is a great way to get started. spend extra time and put a little oomph into it so you're lifting all of the dirt and dander and debris that's stuck in their winter coat. Then you can come in with your flicker brush and start to lift everything out of the hair coat. If you need to, you can come back in with a hard brush. This is sometimes better at getting into a coat that's more dense. If you find you still have a little bit of dust residue, grab your no rinse shampoo, I like Easy Out, and a rag. Get your rag just a little bit wet, and then you can wipe your horse down to lift those last pieces of dust. This often happens when it's dry and there's a lot of static in the air that attracts that dust. There you can go to the wash rack and shampoo your horse. When you're bathing your horse to get ready for clipping, you can just use a very basic, gentle shampoo. This is High Shine. It doesn't strip your horse's natural oils, so he's going to stay shiny. And it actually has some nice properties that help the clippers glide through. If your horse has more sensitive skin, you could use a medicated shampoo like Medicare. This has lemongrass and tea tree oil that's very soothing to the skin. And as you are bathing your horse to clip, I recommend using your favorite curry comb or your grooming gloves, because this really is going to get all the lather and the shampoo and the dirt mixed up so that you can rinse it easily. If the weather is so chilly that you can't give your horse a bath before clipping, we're going to do something called hot toweling. It's a little bit of an arm workout, but that's okay. You're going to start with a groom. Again, with the curry comb and the flicker brush and the hard brush, get as much dirt and dander away from your horse's coat as you can. Then we're going to hot towel. We need some things in order to do this. The first thing we need is a small bucket for our hot water. And then I use a larger bucket as a cold water rinse, and you'll see why in a minute. For our hot water bucket, if you don't have access to hot water from the faucet at your barn, that's okay. You can get a hot water kettle and have instant hot water. All you need is an outlet. So now we can make our hot toweling concoction. I have my hot water and I have my bucket, and I'm gonna pour about that much water so that my bucket's about halfway full. And then I'm going to add to my hot water some Easy Out. This is no rinse shampoo. And I'm just going to use a couple of capfuls. That's enough. So now you can drop a handful of washcloths into your hot water bucket, swirl everything around. Ooh, hot. Want to take out a cloth, it's going to be really hot. You could use kitchen gloves if you wanted to. And we need to wring it out because you want this cloth to be really warm and steamy, but not at all wet. So go for almost dry, barely damp, because we're going to use this cloth on our horse like a curry comb. Once you've got all the moisture out, the temperature also will start to come down a little bit. So I like to fold the cloth up and then use it on my horse like a curry comb, in circles, and even going against the hair to get as close to the skin as possible. Now your horse should not be wet. He might feel a little bit damp, and if it's really chilly, you can cover that area with a cooler and then move on to the next section. This is going to lift any residue that your horse still has on it, any of that leftover dust and dander. And once your rag is totally dirty, toss it in your cold water rinse bucket so that you can reuse that cloth on the next go round. After you finish hot clothing your horse, you can add some grooming products to help the clippers be very slippery through their coat. You could use a sheen product like Magic Sheen. And you don't need to use a whole lot. You can just give your horse a nice dusting. And if you'd like, you can then brush it in to cover all the hair. An alternative would be to oil buff your horse with a grooming oil. This is the #1 light oil. And much like the hot toweling, we're going to start with a bucket of hot water and some cloths. And we're just going to add a couple of capfuls of this light oil to your hot water. That's it, a little bit. Then you can take a cloth, swirl everything around, wring it out, and then this is going to have a little bit of that grooming oil on it, and then you can just wipe your horse down with it. This grooming oil will also give them a little bit of shine when you're done clipping. After your horse has had a bath, make sure they are dry before you start clipping. A lot of moisture on the clipper blades can cause rust, and it also helps to goop up your clippers so they're not going to glide through their coat very well. It's not going to be comfortable for your horse. Try and prevent your horse from rolling as he's drying. You might want to take him for a hand graze or a hand walk in the sunshine, or you can put a cooler over them to help them dry and to keep them a little bit cleaner. When I start clipping, I'm going to start on the larger muscle masses like the flank and the shoulder and sometimes the belly, although they can be ticklish around the belly, because I want to be sure that they get used to the vibrations and the feel before I start going into the smaller areas like around their elbows and their knees and their ears. I also want to be sure to keep one hand on my horse all the time. I want to be able to feel the way that his body is moving in case he decides to step into me. I can push him away. Generally speaking, you're going to use your clippers against the direction of the hair growth. However, you can go diagonally as well. When you get to areas that the hair grows in all different directions, like whorls and around their elbows, then you just kind of have to maneuver the clippers any way you can. It's totally fine to go with the direction of the hair if that's what you need to do. If you find that you're clipping and your horse's skin is very slippery and it moves side to side and your clippers can't catch the hair, you want to use what's called the squish and slide, where I gently press my hands into the hair and then I slide everything across so that the skin is taut and the clippers can move. A great place to employ this is elbows and behind the jawbone and also on the lower legs. If your horse is very tall, your arms are going to get tired reaching up here, and also the clipper lines can get uneven. So I recommend climbing up here on a step stool and then clipping. Make sure your horse is used to being around a step stool, and maybe you have a friend to help you hold on to your horse so that you don't get knocked down. If you decide to do anything but a body clip, remember the body clip, we take every bit of hair off, including legs and face. If you decide to do a trace clip where there's going to be borders or edges, or if you would like to leave a fuzzy saddle pad area for your horse, we want to find a way that we can mark those areas to be nice and symmetrical and to have nice, crisp, clean lines. There's a couple of ways that we can do that. And they all start with a pair of trimmers, the small ones that with the adjustable blades. And I will set that blade to the number 40. And then you will make some patterns on your horse using a border or an edge. For example, if you wanted to leave a fuzzy saddle patch, you could take your horse's numnah or half pad and using your trimmers set to that number 40, outline that half pad. This gives you a physical border to clip up against. The same thing goes for the hind legs. You might want to use a piece of baling twine to create a nice sharp line from where you're going to leave the legs fuzzy and where you're going to leave them clipped. On the front legs, you can use their natural anatomy to go up and around the muscle structure to create a nice border between the hairy legs and the clipped body. I'll use that same technique to create a half face border on the horse where I just keep his cheeks and under the jaw clipped and the rest of his face in the front is fuzzy. Trimmers are more suited for working around the face because they're a little quieter. And the blade is not as wide, so they can really work around some of the lumps and bumps that your horse's natural face has. I also recommend, if you choose to clip your horse's entire face, to be very cognizant of their eyes. I like to keep my hand over the eye, while I'm clipping around it, and I'm always sure to keep my blades pointed away from the eye as I'm clipping. If you'd like to trim up your horse's ears, I recommend leaving the hair on the inside so they have a little protection from UV rays, insects, and also the cold. But you can kind of fold their ear like a piece of paper, and then you can buzz your clippers along the edge to create a nice crisp look, even though your horse's ear is still going to be fuzzy. Let's talk about clipping your horse's legs. You can leave them totally fuzzy as is, you can tidy them up a little bit, or you can clip them all the way to the skin to match the rest of their body. If you choose to clip all the way to the skin, here's a couple of tips for you. One is to pick up the leg as you are going around the back tendons. That gives your clippers more surface area to cover. It's a little bit easier. And when your horse's foot is on the ground, you can use the squish and slide method to press the tendons, then move them a little bit so that your clippers can get all of the hair that rests in between the tendons. If you decide that you just want to take a little off the top and tidy up your horse's legs, use your body clippers, point them down instead of up, and we're going to rake down the leg to just take a little bit off. This is sometimes really helpful if there's a lot of mud around in your horse's paddocks. You can take away a lot of the bulk. It gets a little bit easier to clean, but the leg is still going to be protected because you haven't gone all the way down. Around the knees and hocks is also a tricky place to clip. One, because the hair is really, really dense, and two, it's kind of bony. So the best thing to do is to use only the outer edge of the clippers, not the whole width, and create little stripes going across those areas where the hair is really dense. When it's time to clip along the mane, you want to hold your clippers horizontally and clip a line maybe an inch or so below the actual mane. And then you can come back and hold your clippers vertically and rake up and down, back and forth, to kind of blend the mane with the rest of your horse's clipped body. Now that you're done clipping your horse, it's time to take care of him. You will probably find that you're going to be a little bit itchy, but your horse is also going to be a little bit itchy. So I definitely recommend, if it's really nice warm weather, give your horse a quick rinse off and let them have a roll. If it's not such great weather, groom them, especially with the curry comb, so that you can not only lift all of that loose hair, but you can really kind of get in there and do all of the scratching for your horse. Now let's troubleshoot some common clipping troubles that we can sometimes run into. If you find that your clippers are pulling and tugging against your horse's skin, a couple of things could be going on. Your horse is dirty. Your clipper blades are dirty. It's time to brush them out, get some coolant on them, and then use some clipper oil. Or the blades are dull and they need to be sharpened. It also might mean that the actual clipper body, the motor that's inside here, needs a little service. Maybe it has a part that's wearing out, or there's a lot of hair here that's creating some problems with the motor running smoothly. If you find that you are leaving clipper lines all over the place, could be because of a couple of reasons. One, your horse is dirty. Two, your blades are dirty and they need to be brushed out and cooled and oiled. Three, you're applying uneven pressure, which is totally fine. It just takes a little bit of practice to get used to. Or you're moving the hand up and down, creating waves in the hair coat as you're clipping. If you find a bunch of clipper lines, don't worry about it. Just take your clippers, make sure they're clean, get some fresh oil on there, and go over that entire area in all sorts of directions to smooth everything out. It also grows out with time, so don't worry about it. If you find that your clipper blades are getting hot very quickly, this is a sign that you have a dirty horse, you have dirty clipper blades. The motor needs to be serviced, or you need to stop more frequently to clean these, get some coolant on them, and then use some clipper oil. Ideally, when you're stopping every 5 minutes to check your blades and clean them up, they're not going to be very hot. If you find out that they're hot, let them cool thoroughly, and then maybe stop every 4 minutes or so. If you're using shears, or actually trimmers or body clippers, but especially shears, and you start to hear them rattle, It's likely that the two pieces here are loose and you need to tension them with this tension knob. Now each clipper brand is going to be a little bit different, but to tension your shears, you need to take this knob all the way to the right until you feel tension, and then back it up 1.5 revolutions, and that is the perfect distance for these to be apart and the perfect distance for clipping. Rattling sounds with detachable blades or the 5-in-1 blade probably mean that they're just not clipped in fully. And the best way to prevent this is to actually put the blade on the hinge, then turn them on, and then snap it. That aligns all of the parts, and that should get rid of any rattles. Remember that clipping is just a matter of practicing. It takes time, and the more you clip, the easier it's going to be for you. And it doesn't really matter what the end result is, as long as you keep your horse's health and comfort at the forefront of your mind. Any little bobbles or mistakes or funny blips in your clip, if it's not perfectly smooth, none of it matters. It's going to grow out in a couple of weeks anyway.